Hey guys, welcome back into Legacy. So, I'm going to do a rare double whammy today because this is actually making me a little upset with myself. I'm going to go ahead and do the combat video tonight while I'm thinking about it because if I don't, I'll probably forget if that I need to do it because I get super busy and super like befuddled. So, I'm going to go ahead and shoot the combat video here and talk about Dragon Warriors combat because I think it's important if you just watch the video on Knights to understand how the rules for combat work so you understand a little more what I'm talking about when I'm talking about armor bypass rules and all that stuff. Okay, so combat in Dragon Warriors is a fairly simple uh, mechanic. Uh, it's one of the simpler parts of the game, and so it does not require a lot to understand, but it does require a lot of tactical thinking sometimes. Um, and I'm going to end this video with probably the best advice I've ever gotten in the D&D book ever, because this game absolutely, unequivocally handles it the way that a D&D module and book should, and I think it's a marker of great game design, mostly because of what it says. And I think this is how I run my games, and I honestly think more people could run their games this way and it would make them better. Anyways, so combat in this game is very simplistic. Each combat round is 6 seconds. Again, kind of standard for the time. Most games in the 80s use 6 seconds. I think it's just because it breaks down easier in increments. Um, and then there's the the mechanics, the general mechanics for this are pretty simple. There's a three-step process that you're going to do uh, every time you attack. And the first is you're going to roll a d20 to determine whether you hit, which is called the hit roll. If you fail, the round's over. The opponent gets to strike back. Um, if an attacker scores a hit, he rolls to see whether the blow gets past the opponent's armor. It's called the armor bypass roll. If it fails, the armor does its job. Nobody gets hurt. If you get through the armor, you inflict a wound, your hit points are reduced, or health points are reduced by the damage rating of the weapon. Weapons in this game have static damage. There is no rolls for it. Okay. If everyone is still up after those three steps, of course, you just keep going like a standard D&D game. I'm basically telling anyone who watches this channel definitely things they already know. And so that is the basics of combat. Um, the way that you determine initiative in this game is by reflex score. So reflexes are ordered highest to lowest, common sense. Ties going to player. Ties in this game generally go to the player. So if a monster has a reflex of 11, you have a reflex of 11, you hit first. Pretty simplistic. Um, nothing is stupid here, honestly. But there are more detailed parts to each of the sections. So let me go ahead and get into it. And hopefully by the time this video is done, you'll understand a little more about how warriors work. Okay, so the two hit roll is a d20 roll, which is good because common die that most people are familiar with, and it's a very simplistic factor. Um, if you roll, when you roll your two hit, you're going to roll, you're going to minus the defense score from the opponent. So if your opponent has a defense of, say, 7 and you have an attack of, let's say, 14, you need a 7 or less to hit them. A 20 is always a miss, regardless of any factors. And a 1 is always a hit. It's considered a critical hit that automatically bypasses armor. There are other combat factors that can apply to the two hit roll: magic weapons, high strength, rank abilities, things like that will affect that. Um, I'm not going to get into like a comprehensive list for that because it's just going to complicate the video. I'm trying to give you the basics here. um, read the rulebook if you want all the details. But honestly, the two hit rolls super simple. D20, your attack minus the opponent's defense. That's what you're looking for, or less. Everything in this game, just for record, is roll under. So, um, everything to hit is roll under. The bypass roll is not. Okay, so now once you score a hit, if you score a hit, you have to see if you can penetrate armor. Um, it has what's called an armor factor. Each armor piece has something called armor factor. It rates from 0 for having nothing to 5 for plate mail, everything in between. There's not a ton of different types of armor in this game. They really kind of simplified it, which is good because, again, when you start getting into, well, there's 4 different types of mail armor. Okay, yeah, there are, but we don't need to get into that. If you're wearing mail armor, it has an armor factor of 4. Doesn't matter what type of mail armor you're wearing. Okay, period. You roll you're going to roll a die based on your weapon. So each weapon has different armor penetration die. So like a dagger uses a D4, whereas a battle axe uses a D8. So the bigger, stronger, more powerful weapon you use, the easier it is to penetrate armor. And yes, that does mean that certain armors without help cannot bypass certain weapons cannot bypass certain armors. So like you can never stab a guy in plate armor with a dagger. It just is not going to work without help. That is just how the game plays. I know that sounds wonky, but it's really for game balance purposes. But what you do is you roll your armor penetration die. If you score higher than the armor factor, the attack gets through. Um, and that's where you're going to start doing damage. Um, and then again, weapons in this game do static damage plus factors, combat factors like magical weapons and all that. So each weapon is going to be rated based on, again, on how strong it is, how powerful it is. The bigger, stronger weapon is going to do more damage, uh, you know, and tends to be able to get through more armor types. So, say you're using a regular sword, just a long sword. So you use a sword, it uses a D8 to bypass armor and does 4 points of damage as its base damage. So if you get through their armor with the sword, you do 4 points of health damage, and that is as simple as it gets, guys. Honestly, that is the basics of combat. Um, so you can move up to a quarter of your movement in the same round and strike. Normal movement is 10 meters, uh, so you can move about 2.5 meters in a single action. So roughly about 7.5 feet, or about 8 feet, somewhere around 8 feet, 7 3/4, 8 feet, somewhere in that range. I'm not doing the math in my head right now, and I'm not in the mood to do that. But the exception to this rule, if you surprise your foe, which again you can surprise your foe, so that's a part of the core rules. Which again, I will get into that later. That's getting too deep into it a little bit, but you can move half your movement if you surprise them. Basically, it's a bonus for being able to surprise them. So, and the weapons are, I mean, there's not a ton of weapons in this game, guys. They really just kind of give you the most basic weapons that are common to the Land of Legend. There's daggers, short swords, swords, flails, two-handers, cudgels, morning stars. Basically, standard fantasy fare. Um, and certain ones, of course, are going to be two-handed, and they don't actually have a table for this. They actually draw each weapon in the book and show you what they do and give you the stats for them, because stats are pretty simple. Um, and then here's one of the things I was talking about a second ago with being able to bypass armor and hit and all that kind of stuff can be affected. If you have a high strength, 16, 17, or 18, you add +1 to your bypass and damage. Pretty simplistic. Basically, 16 to 18 +1, anything over 18 is a +2, because you can get over 18 scores if you cast spells on yourself. So, for example, a warlock is a good example of that. He can cast spells on himself and be able to, get 19, 20 strength if he's lucky, especially later in the game. Mention this in the video for knights. If you're using a shield, if you get struck, you roll a d6. If you roll a 1, you catch the blow on your shield. The blow is negated, even if it was a crit. There you go. Like I said, simple. So of course, these rules are only applying to one-on-one fight. If you are going to take on multiple people in an encounter, say you're surrounded by 3 wolves, you have options that you do. And what happens is you can divide your defense up to 3 ways. So if there's up to 3 combatants, no matter how many combatants there are, you can only divide your defense 3 times. So, and you have to announce it before the attacker makes his roll. So The example I would give, like I said, you have 3 wolves on you. If you have a 9 defense, you could commit 3 defense to each wolf. I mean, that's pretty simple math. And again, you could do it however you want, because if you're fighting, say you're fighting 2 wolves and a knight, you may want to commit more of your defense to the knight and less to the wolves, because they're going to do less damage than he will. So again, it's all up to you. But fighting more than one opponent is as simple as you divide your defense. And like I said, you could do it for up to 3 blows. Never more than 3. So wounds and recovery. Uh, Again, you get wounded when you get hit. Uh, if you ever drop to 0, you pass out. Um, so if you pass out, you're completely unusable. Your character is out of the combat. If you ever reduce yourself to -3 hit points, you're dead. Period. Goodbye. Roll a new character. There's very precious few ways to resurrect the dead in this game, if really at all. The dead are the dead, and that's what they stay. Um, what happens once you pass out, though? You roll a d6 at the end of every minute, so every 10 combat rounds. When you roll a 1, you wake up, and you're restored to 1 health point. Uh, and if you know, you don't, you're going to do that basically throughout combat. How you're going to handle that outside of combat, of course, is going to be different. Generally speaking, that's going to be a GM fiat thing. Your other characters can help wake you up. They can do things. There are 2 ways to recover health points: magic and recuperation. Yes, there are heal spells. They're pretty easy to get. And then, of course, uh, recuperation, natural recuperation, is pretty brutal in this game. Um, Again, kind of an artifact of the 80s when it was created, but it still works very well, because this game is kind of brutal. When you start getting hurt, it's supposed to hurt. You don't even start healing for 4 days when you're recuperating. You take 4 days before it begins, and then you gain a number of health points equal to your rank each day until you're back to your unlimited health point score. And like all RPGs, you can never go above your maximum. And the only way to do that, of course, is to rise rank. Pretty, like I said, pretty simplistic. I really hope I'm getting across how simplistic this game can be. It seems very complicated at times, but once you start playing, it just floats so easily. This game is super simple. Missile weapons, though, they're a whole different things. You can't parry arrows. Uh, So, which means that an archer just has to roll less than their attack on the d20, um, which is just kind of awesome. Um, if you if you're standing at short range, you're just rolling your attack. Um, there are, of course, there's going to be modifiers. The further away you are, if you're moving too fast, if you're somebody small. So, say you're trying to shoot a super small creature like a fairy, like a fae. If the light is poor, all those things get taken into account. Um, Basically, they function like defense for people against archers. And I mean, that's really, I mean, seriously, as simple as it gets. There's a little table that gives you some general, uh, you know, general adjustments. By all means, as a GM, this game really encourages GM fiat. So if something makes sense for an archer to have a harder time, he's on lower ground, for example, you could give them a +2. Which would account basically as 2 defense. All kinds of things. If they're in cover, all that kind of stuff. Basically, you just get to do it yourself. Missile weapons, otherwise follow all the same rules as melee weapons. They're going to have an armor bypass die. They're going to have standard damage. That's just how it is. Which makes it really simple. Like I said, this is not hard at all, really, when you go through this. Mentioned in the other video, there are normally combat penalties for wearing armor, too heavy of armor. There's a little table in here. I'm not going to go over the whole table, but an example of this is barbarians and warlocks take -2 if they're wearing plate. for both attack and defense. It's heavy. They're not trained to use it. It's bulky, uncomfortable. It's going to affect your ability to fight. So, it's you. Okay. So like even, and this is actually just a little weird how they do this. Um, if you want to take different actions, there's a good list of actions in the book on page 71 that you can take: cast spells, take out scrolls, take a potion and stopper it, drink potion, activate magical devices, make normal moves, run. Uh, all those things are covered with their own little set of rules. Um, so uh, while ties typically go to defenders or to players in this game, one of the rules of combat is that the actions do happen simultaneously. So if you've ever played a game like BattleTech where you get simultaneous action, everything kind of happens at the same time. Same thing here. Uh, if a player and an NPC both have the same reflex, the player will act first, but the NPC, even if you would otherwise be killed or incapacitated, would still be able to strike prior to passing out. That's just how the rules are written. I love that idea. It's simplicity and it's basics. It's just really easy to do. Um, and of course, like all other RPGs, you can defer your action. So if you're going to act at the same time as an NPC, but you want to see what he's going to do, you can defer your action till later in the round to, see what he does. I mean, it's again kind of a common thing in RPGs. Um, the last thing they really needs to be covered is the idea of evasion. So certain types of attacks and certain types of events in combat, you can't dodge them with defense. You can't defend them away. Statues falling on you, a boulder rolling off of a trap, a certain ray from a magical spell. Those things are all going to be evaded, which is where your evasion score comes in. If you go back to the character creation video, evasion is pretty simple. Um, it's a little different, but it's very simple. You're going to have your evasion score. The attack is going to have a speed. Um, the more dangerous, faster the object, the higher the speed, of course. Makes common sense. Again, this is not rocket science, guys. Um, so what you're going to do is you're going to minus your evasion from the speed, and the GM is going to make a roll on 2d10, or sorry, you're going to roll up a 2d10 instead of a d20. If the number is greater than the speed minus evasion, you get hit by it. It's basically a two-hit roll using different mechanics. Otherwise, you get out of the way. And just like with hits, the lowest possible number you can roll is always going to exceed no matter what factors are involved, and a 20 is always going to fail no matter what the factors are involved. So even if you would otherwise avoid it on a 20, if you roll a 20, you get whacked. And again, very, very amazingly good table in here that kind of gives you great examples of different speeds. Um, you know, things like toppling statues are speed 5, whereas a dragon's flame is speed 16. Very simple. And it's just really, like I said, very simple. This game is not complicated, but I did think this was an important video to kind of get out tonight just to make sure everyone kind of understood all of it. So there's two ways you can back out of combat, and when things go sideways. And this is one of my favorite parts of this game. This game does not pull punches. It makes it very clear that you are going to be in fights you cannot win. You are going to be in fights that you start losing because dice roll screw you. You are going to be in fights that just are fundamentally unfair because you're not prepared for the challenge. It does not tell GMs to balance encounters. It does not tell them that kind of stuff. It tells them to give the players a challenge and make them figure out how to do it. So, all All that being said, there's two ways to retreat. The first is if you're wanting to retreat, you can do what's called a retreat action. You defend normally, and you can back up to a quarter of your movement, which in 2.5 meters in the case of a human, which almost everyone is. Um, if if the opponent does not follow up on you, you can turn around and run after that. The round after that, you can also, depending on how bad the situation is, simply route. You turn your back, you run, and when you do that, they get a free strike at your back, giving you zero defense, giving them basically a free strike at you. Um, and players should always be prepared to get out of fights. And again, it does also say in here, guys, don't be surprised when monsters chase you. Again, the GM advice in this book is great because it tells you if a monster is smart or a NPC is smart, don't treat them like they're stupid. If you're fighting a bunch of bandits and they're trying to rob you blind and you try to run away, don't have qualms about having them chase down fleeing characters. That's just all there is to it. It doesn't matter how bad the combat's going for the players. If the players are in a bad situation, they need to prepare for the possibility that they need to get out. And then this is actually one of the better pieces they give, and I'm just going to read direct from the book because this is actually really like players don't think like this sometimes. The characters may discourage pursuit by throwing down food to distract unintelligent creatures, or treasure in the case of more discerning pursuers. Very intelligent and powerful monsters will not be fooled by such tactics. Why should they stop and pick up baubles when they can catch the characters and get all their treasure? And then, it finishes off here, and I'm just going to finish off the same way. Monsters can always run away too. So if you're fighting an orc, it can run. You're fighting a bandit and they start losing, they don't have to stand there and take it like you think. Like, a lot of people run games to the death, and the idea of morale rolls and stuff have kind of gone out the window in games like D&D. Monsters can be smart enough to get out of fights and regroup, and NPCs can be smart enough to go get help if they need it. So don't be afraid to do that. And honestly, guys, that is the rundown on combat. It is, like I said, super simple, super super well developed. Uh, and like I said, I really hope I kind of get across when I was talking about it the idea that you really should be fighting smart. You should be fighting competently, and your characters should never just assume they're going to win because you never know what the person can do. They could call up help. They could surround you. They can outnumber you. There's a lot of things that go sideways in a combat in Dragon Warriors. So again, guys, welcome thoughts, comments, questions, concerns. If you got any detailed questions you want answered, I'll try to answer them again. If I can't, I will try to get you the information if I can. Otherwise, guys, we do hope you have fun and do hope to see you guys around the game table.